Hello, welcome to another episode of the Common Chord. Excited to talk today with Nathaniel Wilkerson with Medeek Software. How are you doing, Nathaniel?
Good. Excellent. Thank you.
Some of you may be familiar with his work. He has several SketchUp plugins, and he's been doing this for a long time. So I'm excited today to be able to talk shop about all things trusses and just the structural approach that he's taken. So I'm really curious just how it all got started.
Just a little over 10 years now that I've been working on them. So I guess it's been a while. Anyways, in 2012, 2013, I started my engineering company because I had just got my PE license in Washington State. So I'm like, hey, I'm going to start my own little business. And I always was kind of interested in doing residential structural stuff. So I had a couple mentors that I found, and they kind of helped me kind of get started, off on the right foot. And so I was doing that, right? And then in the process, I was putting out little calculators, and I still have a lot of calculators on my website. I built a little calculator, and it's still on my website as well. It's called the Truss Designer. It's actually a truss calculator. And so it's really simple. I mean, it's not like it's really elaborate, and it's very limited, right? You can only do like a Fink truss that you can really fully analyze. I basically put together this little web-based calculator that does full matrix analysis, right? It's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
More than anything else, it was an academic exercise. It wasn't
Yeah.
even really designed to be a commercial product. I put that out there because I thought, hey, somebody might find this useful, because I had a bunch of other engineering tools that I'd created that were helping me actually in what I was doing day to day. People started using it, and mostly I think a lot of guys that were doing like solar panels. So I had it basically set up so that it could export out the geometry
Yeah.
into AutoCAD. Sorry, I was getting a little technical here, but
No, that's great. We love technical details here.
it would spit out a bunch of results to the web page, right? But it would also give you an opportunity where you could click a little button and it would generate an auto lisp routine that you could drop into AutoCAD and it would generate the geometry, right? I had a guy email me and he says, can you do it for SketchUp? I just started digging around on SketchUp's website, and sure enough, they had a backend language. And I just like, man, I'm like, okay. And literally, like within an hour, I had written a small SketchUp Ruby script, basically, that you put into the Ruby console in SketchUp. And now it spits out the whole geometry in SketchUp, and actually makes a nice little 3D truss, right? So I thought, well, that's really cool. If you go on my website right now, you'll see that you have that ability within that little calculator to generate the geometry within SketchUp, right? And that was really the birth of the extensions. It wasn't a full-fledged extension. It was just like, okay, it generates a little bit of Ruby code. You push that in, you pop that into SketchUp, and out pops your truss. At some point, I went onto SketchUp's website and I found they had a forum like for users, and then I posted a link to my web-based calculator. I mean, here's a way you can generate, geometry, and it'll push it right into SketchUp. And then I started a little thread on their forum. And up until that point, I'd always treated SketchUp kind of like a toy. I'm embarrassed to say that now, right? Like, honestly, I am. But that was my impression of SketchUp, where it was just like this kind of fun toy that architects use to make up their little mass models and what have you. I mean, for me, it wasn't like a serious tool. AutoCAD was the tool, right? There was a fellow from South Africa. Basically, he told me, he said, hey, like, are you going to make this into a SketchUp extension or a SketchUp plugin? And I started digging around the internet a little bit just to find out what is he talking about. And then I realized, hey, you can actually, rather than just dumping this piece of code into the SketchUp console, you can actually make this into a program and then have it actually part of SketchUp. So I just kept kind of developing it, as during the October, November of 2015, and I just a side hobby. I mean, I was working on my engineering, right? I wasn't.
Yeah.
This wasn't making any money or doing anything for me. I was just goofing around, because it was kind of fun.
Yeah. You're scratching your own itch.
Yeah, I was just like, man, this is really cool. The ability to write a bit of code and then have it spit up, and all of a sudden you've got this 3D geometry. Right. But that was 2015. That was the start. And like I said, it was almost by accident. This guy asked me if I could export it geometry out into SketchUp.
Yeah. So it wasn't like you were looking at platforms and thinking, I'm going to build this huge, all these different engines and what's the best platform to support that. It was kind of just where you started and then you kept running with it.
I didn't even know what an extension was, let alone looking for some way to build this thing. But Once I started using the Ruby language, it's nice to use. It's not like Autolisp or something. It's really pleasant to program in my opinion. I mean, I could be wrong, but people kept requesting stuff on the forum, right? Like I got all these trusses that I've added, all these truss types like scissor trusses and and all the different, not just Fink truss. I mean, start with the Fink truss, but then I started adding in like all the variants, like queen post and the king and I just started adding all the different variants. And then I started realizing maybe I could do something with this. Maybe I should start charging for this. I think it was 2016, in the summer of 2016. So literally about 6 months or 8 months later. And then somebody asked me about, I need foundations, right?
Okay.
I need some stem walls, right? And I thought about it and I'm like, yeah, it shouldn't be that hard. Actually, that's easier to do than the trusses. There's a lot less geometry going on with a slab. I'm like, okay, well, I got the roofs, I got the foundations. But what about the walls? We're missing the walls. So, so at that point, I actually was going to develop a wall extension, right? I was like, I might as well put together a wall extension. There's a fellow by the name of John Brock. He's also a guru, I call him. He's really good at SketchUp, and he was actually getting ready to develop his wall extension. He calls it Framer. I think he made a video with some of the people at SketchUp, and they kind of featured him. He was talking about, okay, I'm going to build this framing plugin. At that point, I just kind of thought, well, you know, he's kind of beat me to the punch. So I'm like, well, I'll just stick to my trusses and my foundations, and if I'll let him come out with a wall plugin because I figured he was already far ahead of me, right?
Yeah.
And so I kind of gave it up actually in 2017. That was February or March of 2017. And then in the meantime, I'm working on building out these other two, right? Just the foundation and the truss for the rest of the year and then into early 2018. And then by 2018, I'm like, well, where is the wall plugin that he's supposed to have? Because he hadn't released it, right? I'm like, it's already been a year, and I'm like, well, maybe I should just do it. So I did. But as time went on, over these few months, I started spending more and more time on the plugins because they were so fun to do, and less time on my real work, to the point where my wife literally got mad at me and she's like, "Hey, you're not making enough money right now." Because when you're just doing your own little business, like, well, there's no salary, right? You're just like,
Mhm.
okay, if I pull down 4 jobs this month, great, I've made X amount of dollars. But if I only pull down 3 jobs, okay, now I'm coming up short. There was a job that came open with the city of Ocean Shores. So it's basically working as a city engineer, right? I get home from work, I'd be like, I still got some steam in me. So I'd work like from 6 p.m. to midnight every day on my plugins.
Wow.
Plus I'd go to work every day. So I was putting in some serious hours, but I was having so much fun that I was just like, this is all good. I decided, okay, I'm going to do a Kickstarter. I think it was March or April. I did a Kickstarter to see if I had any interest. I'm like,
Yeah.
if I get enough interest from the user base, because I already had a user base at that point, kind of with the other two plugins. Then I says, I'm going to go for it. I'll develop the wall plugin, and I'm going to quit and just work on this full time. And so I did the Kickstarter. I only made, shoot, it was like a little over $3,000. Not much, but I'm like, that's enough. That's enough for 1 month's rent. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Wow. That's very impressive.
I'm going to quit the job at the city of Ocean Shores, and I did. And then basically, I've been working on the plugins basically full time since May or April 2018.
When I said you've been doing this for a long time, it probably hasn't felt that way to you. It feels like maybe within the last several years, you've just kind of been able to pour all of your energy into it.
So 2018 was kind of the year where I basically hung up my engineering hat. I quit my day job, and I started work on the wall plugin, and I really started work on the wall plugin hard. Like I just kept pushing out, pushing out. And honestly, we weren't making much. I mean, we were barely hanging in there because I hadn't got the momentum yet,
Yeah.
right? Didn't have the customer base. I remember in September of 2019, about a year later, I started seeing enough orders come in to pay the bill. I mean, I'm not getting rich by any means. I hate to say it, but we're paying the bills. You know what I mean? And so basically, since then, it's been pretty stable for us and pretty good.
Oh, that's great. So, did you ever consider like, taking a different approach to it or refactoring a lot of the stuff that you had done at the beginning? or have you just kind of always added to it and kind of refactored as you went? Have you kind of developed it with the same ecosystem in mind the whole time?
Yeah, like when I start a new piece or a new extension, I already had a starting space, right? I'm like, okay, well, I've got my HTML menus already kind of crafted the way I like how I look. And so I just take that code, literally copy the files, rename them, and then start tweaking them. So there is a lot of refactoring of code with regards to creating new tools or new pieces. And so, no, that definitely has helped. And then as early as 2020, I knew I had to have a floor plugin, right? Because I didn't have floors really nailed down. I had a little floor module in the truss plugin.
Where you could do floor trusses in the truss module, but this was like a committed floor module that you created.
Right. So I'm like, okay, I really need to have a full-fledged floor plugin. And trust me, I had users that were yelling at me like, hey, where's the floor? You got everything else, but where's the floors? So no, and I knew that. I mean, the truss plugin, like I said, it had floor trusses. And actually I added, solids on joists, and I added some
Yeah.
I joists to it. I needed a full-fledged floor plugin. And so yeah, I finally got to it in 2024 and knocked it out really quickly, actually. But the reason why I was able to knock it out so quickly was I basically borrowed a lot from all the plugins, and I'm like, okay, well, I need, this piece, and I was able to put it together relatively quickly. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So is a lot of the customers that use it, are they typically architects or engineers, or who do you find your customer base is mostly?
The customer base is pretty varied, I think. Yeah, there is a lot of designers. There's some architects that use it, obviously, engineers, a lot of general contractors, guys that are doing new builds, guys that are doing remodels. And then there's also just a lot of DIYer types, they're like just a real mix of people that used extensions, I think.
When you got into the world of the truss design software, did you feel like it was a black box at all? Like I remember you were saying you were studying the design drawings. What was kind of the hard part of figuring some of that out?
Before I even did the extensions, I made this little calculator, right? I had different books I bought, and I was really interested in trusses. And just by studying lots of MyTech drawings and looking at some books that I had about it, I was able to kind of figure it out. And then I also went and purchased the Truss Plate Institute, the
Hmm.
TPI one, which is the authoritative
Yeah.
engineering document for trusses, and I studied that. I mean, and literally I had to study that, otherwise I couldn't make my truss calculator, right? So that was kind of, I went through that with a fine tooth comb, and I digested the darn thing. I mean, it wasn't fun reading, to be honest.
It's the end of the day, kick back with a little TPI reading.
Yeah.
That's a good way to end the day.
And really that's what it was for me initially. I was just like, the whole truss calculator or truss designer little thing I wrote, it was more of an educational challenge or opportunity, I thought. And I just really want to understand how exactly, you go through the process of engineering these trusses. And so, yeah, it was just, that's kind of what it was. Like I said, that was never really meant to be any sort of product.
Because there's TPI, which gives you a bunch of code elements, and you're trying to figure out how that maps into your software. And that's what ours is based on as well. And so
Right.
it's there's a lot there, but at the end of the day, it all goes back to those engineering principles. And you're really just trying to digest how can you represent it in maybe a little bit more of a simplified way, so that users can get what they need out of it without having to know all of those aspects of the TPI. Was there certain things that were hard about building out this suite of software tools that you built? Like, what's your biggest challenge that you've had to face?
Well, initially, the biggest challenge, I think, was just trying to figure out the whole SketchUp API, which is basically the back end for SketchUp, and figuring out how to manipulate it so I could get what I want out of it. And that took a little while to figure out. And once I figured out, it wasn't too bad. But at that point, then it was just a matter of building tools that what people needed. Say you want to draw a rafter roof that's in some L-shaped building, right? So you just go ahead and you pick a bunch of points around that perimeter, and it pops your roof, right? What gets complicated though is when you start dealing with complex roofs like that, I got to figure out how to actually mathematically draw this thing and where everything goes. And so I mean the math gets pretty fun. So I would say the hardest thing that I've programmed with regards to that is the complex roof module. When I started programming that, that was like, okay, I'm really going to have to dig deep because this thing is kicking my butt.
Yeah, you get the books back out. Yeah. And I mean, we definitely see the difference between if you're gonna do one truss, a singular component, and get all the engineering and analysis for that, like that's definitely hard. But then you go to layout where you're having to account for all of those roof shapes and all of the different setups that a builder could have, and that just gets really quite difficult. So yeah, we probably understand more than most people how difficult that is to represent in 3D space.
Right. And so when I first started, it would just generate one truss, right? That's easy, right? And then I started thinking, okay, with the truss plugin, I say, well, let's have them make an array of trusses and put a gable truss on both ends, and then put the sheathing and cladding on top, and
Yeah.
the gypsum on the bottom for the ceiling. So, and that's not even that hard. I mean, because it's well defined, right? I mean, sure, you've got your span and you got your building length. So, and so you've got a rectangle that you're putting a roof on. And then eventually that's when I realized this is too simplistic, right?
Yeah, yeah. You can only build a pole barn or something like that. Yeah.
Right, or garage or something. It's
Yeah.
like, well, what do we do now? What then you've got an infinite number of possible, perimeters that you're going to put in a roof on. That's where it starts getting more complicated. And the same thing with the wall plugin. With the wall plugin, you think, well, walls are easy, right? It's just a flat plane they're made out of studs. Okay, well, that's a wall if it's a rectangular wall. But now, what about walls that intersect at corners and walls that intersect at the T, right? You've got to figure out some algorithm so that these walls connect and that they frame out correctly. See, that's where the wall plugin got complicated because initially just making a wall, that's no big deal. But now I've got to make it so when I draw a bunch of walls, it auto detects the wall corners and knows how to deal with them, right? And so that made it complicated. Yeah.
Do you talk
Yeah.
very often to component manufacturers, or are there a lot of people in that side of the world that use Medeek?
I haven't really had much conversations with them. If you look at my extensions,
Yeah.
you're going to find there's a lot of Simpson hardware that I've created low poly versions of all of their hardware into my extensions, as well as some MyTech stuff.
In Paragon, it started in a lot of ways pretty similar to you, where it was a Lisp, auto Lisp plugin. He owned a truss plant. And so everything is kind of originated from this component manufacturer's point of view, really trying to make the trusses manufacturable and then allow you to put whichever brand of plates you want on the
Right.
trusses. And then it changes based on those values that are defined. It's definitely more on the production side of things, but you have to kind of take into consideration what are ways for component manufacturers to quickly design and create these layouts, because that's a huge part of what they do day in day out is
Yep.
creating these roof layouts. So your job as an engineer, like have you ever been tempted to go back into the service side of it, or has some of the work that has come in from developing these plugins resulted in engineering work, or do you just pass that all on now?
Usually within a month, I get 6, 7, 8 requests for me to engineering services for people. I haven't done any real engineering projects to speak of. I mean, maybe just a couple little things, but nothing serious, in my opinion, since 2018. Like I said, I pretty much hung up my engineering hat when it came to doing just like basic residential work for people, right? But the thing is here's the thing. Just this last fall, I started working on the Medeek engineering extension. Okay, so that's my newest one. I have a beam calculator that I already programmed on my website, right? It's very simplistic. Like you can put either a distributed load on it or you can put a single point load right in the center. Okay, that's pretty much useless to be honest. As a beam calculator, like no, I mean, sure, there are beams that are loaded like that, but there's way more beams that are not loaded like that, right? So you need to be able to assign loads to that thing, just like you can do with any other beam calculator out on the market, right? I've got a beam module in my wall plugin where you can create glulam beams and all kinds of beams.
Yeah.
Yeah, LVLs, whatever, even steel beams. So I'm like, okay, well, I would love to be able to keep it all in SketchUp. So basically, I've got a beam I've drawn, for instance, let's say in SketchUp with my beam module. And now I would love to put some loads on that and assign where the supports are and multiple supports even, like who knows, 3, 4, whatever, and multiple load types, distributed point loads wherever scattered on this beam, and then have it run the numbers. So in order to do that, though, it's a lot more complicated than just a simple single beam, one single equation. It's you're basically running a matrix analysis again, just like I do on the trusses. So I had to take and rewrite or basically recreate my truss plugin, but specifically for a beam. And so I wrote a new matrix analysis engine that runs within
Wow.
SketchUp. And so I just pushed that out, like I think it was in December, right before Christmas. I only have it running for sawn lumber. I've got to work on the glulam beam and everything else. I spent so much time actually on that engineering plugin for a few months that I kind of let everything else kind of slide. Honestly, I'm a little spread thin.
I mean, and you've got so many of those different tools that are solving different problems.
Uh,
Like I know just from our team, it's hard enough to focus on all the trust requests that we have. I
yeah,
mean, I think when the backlog first started, it was, hey, if we can finish these 500 things, then we'll be golden. And now it's several thousand requests that, have been captured. So we totally understand that. And then, once you get into the engineering side of it, there's so many technical details that are hard. You have to get those right, ensure that they're that enough flexibility is there for you to help engineers do it quickly and efficiently.
yeah, yeah. And also too, since I haven't done engineering for a while, I mean, I'm like, okay, well, I got to buy the new ASC 722. Now I'm comparing the last 716 and then the 710. I'm comparing all the updates and changes with regards to load cases and all that fun stuff. And I'm like, okay, so 8 extensions now. I started an HVAC extension as well as an electrical extension, like for putting outlets and light switches and all that into my walls, right? So I did that back in 2019, but I've been working on that one as well. So I'm really wanting to return to my engineering roots a little bit and start developing that engineering. So I combine that with the architectural now, all in one package. So it's like you don't have to leave SketchUp. You draw your little whatever in SketchUp, and then you're like, okay, let's select this and run the numbers on this. And the nice thing is my engineering extension, it will spit out the report. So you can save it as a PDF and it all nicely formatted, you know what I mean? And so you've got your engineering report for that whatever member or whatever, and you're good to go. But
Yeah, no, I
yeah,
love it.
that's
You
my
you
vision anyway.
are doing it all, which is incredible. The goal would be to get a fully modeled BIM house or residential project that you can have all your details there. What is the next, I guess, the next year look like for you? Are you going to be focused mainly on the engineering piece?
Yeah. I mean, the engineering piece, obviously I really want to focus on that. I also have the plumbing plugin. So I basically have what I call the MEP package, right? I've got the BIM package, which is 5 extensions. Then I've got 3 other extensions that form the MEP, right? Mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. So I have the electrical, I have an HVAC, which, by the way, is pretty new and needs a lot more work, but it's functional. The plumbing is even more intensive. So basically, I've got 2 extensions that really need help. The plumbing extension, which has not been released, hoping to release in the next couple months, and then the engineering extension, which has been released, but just needs way more attention. It needs way more tools added to it. I mean, there's so many tools a guy could add. I mean, there's a bunch of concrete tools for checking spread footings, stem wall footings, shear walls for, lateral forces in buildings. I've written shear wall calculators in Excel, but I can easily program those up into Ruby and then have shear wall calculators for my walls that are in SketchUp already. And then of course I can take a truss calculator I've already written and it's a matrix analysis, and I've already written a matrix analysis engine now for the beam calculator. So I just need to augment it a little bit, and now I've got the full on thing for trusses if I want to go that far. I don't know. We'll see how I do on that one.
Yeah,
That's a big one. Get about 5 more of me working on different things all at the same time, but I just haven't.
yeah.
Yeah, I haven't got that
So
far yet.
I'm curious, what some of the limitations or misunderstandings that builders have about structural loads, or what are some of the things that you see most commonly overlooked or passed by when you've seen different people designing in your software?
Well, up until now, I haven't had an engineering piece to the software, right? I've just primarily focused on just the geometry,
Visual representation. Yeah.
visual representation. That's it. I mean, that's really all there has been. And I don't put limitations. You have to put a 9-inch deep glulam beam here. No, you put whatever you want. So as far as the engineering goes, I guess up until now, I haven't really been concerned with it. I mean, I make things so they seem reasonable. Like, I mean, you're making a 2x6 exterior wall with two top plates and a single bottom plate usually, and got your headers on your door and your windows, and you have different options that you can set up for those. I haven't been overly concerned with the actual engineering or design of the structure. Really, I'm just giving people the tools and setting them loose with it and saying, hey, do what you want with it. But then when we start talking about engineering, that's where that kind of changes. And I'm like, okay, well, here's your numbers. It's either a go or a no go.
Yeah. Yeah. It becomes more of a feasibility question of like, is this possible? Or, yeah, what's the best way to do this? We've talked a lot recently about just estimation because so many people go into it with a question of, will this work and how much will this cost? And between
Right.
those two things, there's quite a bit of variance, because everything could work if you just added more steel or lumber to it. Like eventually you could get it to work, but it's a question about optimizing and how do you get that to the point where in the end goal is what that person wanted, but without adding all of this extra, stuff to it that's going to cost more. So that's where a lot of our focus has been recently, has just been trying to find that balance. So I'm curious, from your perspective, do you see a lot of people when they design something in the SketchUp and Medeek ecosystem, do they typically just end up building that themselves, or is it part of their construction crew? Is that usually kind of how it looks?
Well, like I said, I've got a real varied user base. Some of these guys will call me up and say, hey, I use your extensions, and they'll send me models of what they've done. And I'm like, wow, that's impressive. The guys that use my extensions do way more with my extensions than I could ever do with them.
That's awesome.
I guess I'm saying I don't have those design skills like some of my user base does. It's fun to talk to some people because they'll say, hey, I took your extension, drew up a rafter roof, and the rafter roof is framed out precisely, right? The one guy, he said he gave it to his whoever in his shop, and he just went off the model and hand cut, all the pieces like a Lego set, and usually, you got to be out in the field. And if you're cutting it into a rafter roofing, I mean, you're getting your tape measure on. Okay, we got to cut this board and we got to whatever, right? No, he pre-cut the whole silly roof. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. That's pretty risky, man.
I love it. It did the job. That's great. I think as we kind of wrap up, a big part of
Mhm.
what we refer to as the common chord is just this desire to build an end result that is excellent and that has the pride that we built our software with, right? That we
Mhm.
want to go into serving the end result of the customer and what they're trying to build. And so it is always super encouraging when you see someone actually super excited or happy about their end result and they've saved money or they've saved time in being able to build something that's truly unique. Is that the satisfaction that kind of keeps you going, or what really keeps you going and moving on this project?
The first thing that kept me going was just the magic of it, like I'm just like I write a bunch of code and you hit a couple buttons and boom, there's your roof. You know what I mean? Like your full truss roof. And I'm like, this thing is just awesome. It's just cool. Like I got all this 3D geometry and I didn't have to hand model any of this. It just poof, it's there. So there's that satisfaction, I guess. And then just coding and then like add this feature in. And then pretty soon I've got adding in the soffit and the fascia and the gutters and everything else, right? That is just the magic of building out a 3D engine like this. It's generating all this geometry. And then, yes, it's time. Like I have so many people email me or call me and they'll say, you know what? They're like, I use your extensions and yeah, I could hand draw this, in SketchUp. You can manually do everything my
Yeah,
plugins do. There's no reason why
very
you can't.
painfully.
There's no magic there. You know what I mean? Really, there isn't. Right. I mean, and I've actually made a couple of videos, tutorial videos, like on my YouTube channel. I'm like, okay, guys, I'm going to show you how to draw a wall. And I manually go through, and it takes me like 30 minutes or something to draw this very basic wall with a window in it, right? And at the end of that, I'm like, okay, let me show you how to do it with the plugins. And literally within 10 seconds, I've done everything it took me 30 minutes to do. And I'm like, see, I says, this is why we need the plugins. And then watch this. I says, I'm going to move this window from here like a foot over, right? And of course, it's parametric. So it moves all our heads and it moves everything around, right? Gets it all right. I try to do that manually in SketchUp. Like, okay, I've got to move a window. Well, shoot, now I gotta start shifting stuff all around.
Even just selecting all the right things becomes a battle.
It's too much work. See, SketchUp is an amazing 3D environment, in my opinion. I haven't found a better one. It by itself, though, it's kind of a skeleton, right?
Mhm.
It's a template. But then you couple it with some what I call well-crafted extensions. Hopefully that's what mine are. But and there's other ones out there. But you couple those two together and you get that parametric ability now.
Mhm.
Now you've got some real power. That's my art for my extensions.
For the innovation that you see in this space, what do you think the opportunities are where this industry is headed in general with modeling and BIM and really just trying to figure out all the details on the computer before it ends up being built?
But that's yeah, I mean, that's where I think it's going. It needs to go there because it's way cheaper to cut on paper before you cut real wood, right? When I was back in college, I worked construction for a company here in Utah when I was going to BYU. Yeah, it was painful. Like sometimes we make a mistake and then we had to tear it out and start over. And of course, my boss is ready to kill us all. The thing is you got software like Revit, right? And I'm not going to rev it down. I mean, I think it's a great product for what it does. For whatever reason, it just doesn't seem to work well in the residential, in that space. I mean, commercial stuff like, skyscrapers and what have you. I mean, that's a whole other world, right? But in the residential construction world, we need to have a BIM system. We need to have tools that are like that. They basically just quickly design a whole building. You want to have the geometry, you want to have the estimating, and you want to have the engineering. If you can combine those three and you can integrate them all so you don't have to keep duplicating work, so you put them all in one package somehow, that to me is the holy grail. And actually I forgot to mention my extensions. I do have an estimating module that I started as well. Now that it's working pretty well for the wall plugin. That's another thing I need to focus on actually this year is that. Because I haven't fleshed it out yet for the floor plugin I just added. So the floor plugin needs to be integrated with it more completely. But yeah, I mean, and also I have a cost database that I just recently added to it. So not only does it tell you how much, square footage of sheathing you got, but you put your cost in the cost database, and that'll tell you how much your overall cost is. If you bring those three things somehow and put it all together, in my mind, that's where residential construction and architecture and everything needs to go. Let's automate it. We've got the computing power. I mean, for heaven's sakes. And if we don't do it, guess what? AI is going to do it for us. So we better get it done.
Has that
Yeah.
changed your workflow at all, or has it made you a little bit more productive?
I try not to use AI too much, only because when I was doing the engineering piece, when I first started working on it, there were some parts that were getting tricky. And I started using ChatGPT to help me code certain pieces. Honestly, I was quite blown away. For certain tasks, it was teaching me how to code. Like,
Yeah.
and it was doing things that I'd look at the code and I'd be like, dang, I didn't know you could do that. But now I do know you can do that. So that's a more efficient way of doing it. Check this for me and tell me, maybe there's a better way of doing it. It just cleaned up my code, made it more efficient, made it faster too. That's the other thing. Performance hits. I'll ask ChatGPT, I'll say, hey, is this going to cause, me to slow down? It can determine that. And I can't.
Yeah, you did it to the best of your ability when you did it, but yeah, having that second best practice eye on it is really helpful.
It's almost like having like an advanced graduate student sitting over your shoulder, telling you where you're making mistakes.
Yeah, and one that's, like, trained on a lot of different scenarios.
So it helps me, in those sorts of ways. It makes it, yeah, it has made me more efficient as a coder. Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Nathaniel, for sitting down. This is really really cool, and I think I can't remember the first time I ran across your work. I think I may have mentioned I was looking up if there was a ASCE plugin for location data, and that's how you came up first. And then at one point, I was designing my own house, and I modeled it in SketchUp, And then I saw
Mhm.
you for that as well. And I ended up using Chief Architect to model most of it. But when it came to the roof planes, I could not figure out the roof planes at all. Like the way that things were supposed to go together. And I think that's maybe when I started looking, well, do I need to do this in SketchUp and looking at different options of doing it. But I ended up hiring the contractor, and he was able to kind of run with my plans from there and build the rest of it. But it was,
Yeah.
to me, it's always incredible what decisions can be changed when you have the visualizations and when you have all of that data there where you can really look at it and analyze it and say, what would it be like if we move this to 2 feet this way, or what would it be like if we expanded this slightly? I will let you run. Thank you so much for sitting down. I'm sure we could keep going for a long time because I think we're both in that intersection of the trying to model out all these things, but also all the love of developing quality software too. It's super cool to see somebody else that really enjoys and loves their craft.
I'm having fun. Like I said, I have so much fun doing this that it doesn't even feel like work to me. I wake up every day and I'm like, what else am I going to add? You know what I mean? Or
I
how am I
love
going
it.
to make this point? Well, thank you.